U.S. cities becoming a winning issue for the president. Full panel here with me now. Niall Stanage, White House columnist for The Hill. Jessica Anderson, former budget official in the first Trump administration. Hannah Brandt, NewsNation political correspondent. And Dan Cannonen, former Battleground States Director for both the Biden and Harris campaigns. Hello to you all. Thanks for being in. Appreciate it. We got some polling on this today, and it was a little bit of a mixed bag because on the issue of sending in the National Guard troops, the president there underwater. But how about this? His handling of crime? He's above water there in an AP poll. And overall, Jessica, the country says the issue of crime in major cities is something that deserves attention. And then you hear that from Muriel Bowser today.
Yes, and I think what the mayor is pointing out is what we've all felt as residents here in D.C. I work here. I go to church here on Sundays. This is the safest Washington, D.C. in August in its history. And that is a big deal. Someone that even the mayor, who 2 weeks ago had major concerns about President Trump bringing in this force to the city, is now supportive. She
also had some concerns, though, about ICE and the National Guard being here versus police.
Of course, but I actually think Trump is differentiating these issues, and these polls get to it, right? The general consensus is that Americans want safety and security. The details of how to do it vary based upon how Trump has chosen to exercise that for law enforcement.
So do we hear more? I mean, you're not going to hear Gavin Newsom or J.B. Pritzker saying any of that anytime soon, or Brandon Johnson there in Chicago. Yeah. But do you expect more Democratic mayors to sort of lean into this, or no?
Well, look, I mean, Trump is doing this partly because he wants to debate on crime on his terms, right? Mm-hmm. He's better on crime than other issues in the Q poll or the AP poll. I mean, he's really underwater in everything else, the economy, foreign policy. And he's I think it was 31-58 with independents in that Q poll, very bad numbers. But on crime, he can draw Democrats into a debate. And I think if Democrats come in and say there is no crime in these cities, everything is great, that's not a good posture for them. And Bowser has to be especially careful because she's in the federal district and has less authority than like a Pritzker has. But the other night you had the Attorney General from Illinois on your program, Mike, and he made the point that the state of Illinois and the city of Chicago has been asking for years for ATF and the FBI to come in collaboration with the city and with the state on crime reduction, trained agents who understand violent crime reduction capabilities with tools and the force to do that. The big, beautiful bill cut 2,000 agents, $500 million, 30% reduction in ATF. That's the kind of support that a guy like Pritzker or the mayor of Chicago would need. This is more performative for Trump to get the issue and the optics.
But at the bottom line, do Americans say, yeah, I understand your explanation, I just want my streets safe? And they hear the president doing this and they just see two different messages.
Yeah, I think he's banking on the idea that you can draw people into a debate on crime, better turf for him. And I think Democrats should say, look, we want to meet you there on crime, but as Conor Lamb said, to get a bill done, you're going to need a lot of support from the other side. Yeah. You're going to have to get a consensus. I just don't think Trump's going to do that.
Well, I think we haven't seen the president have any problem pressuring Republicans in Congress to work to his will. So I think it depends on when they come back. If President Trump wants to keep the focus on this, and this week would indicate he absolutely does, do we see him take next steps to make it into legislation?
I think in D.C. you have to actually be realistic about what the residents of D.C. think. You were talking about polling earlier on. There was a Washington Post poll done. 79% of Washington, D.C. residents were opposed to the deployment of the National Guard. A city that voted more than 90% for Kamala Harris, viewing this, I think, as a personal power move on Trump's part.
And I would add in all of the polling that I've seen that most people oppose federal takeovers of local police departments. So they might support how Trump is handling this.
So in a way, is it kind of like immigration? Like at the end of the day, the president nailed that issue during the election. And then, as to Jessica's point, it's the details in there of how you go about implementing it that determine whether or not this is viewed as a success or not.
Look, I think he understands TV better than any president in history, obviously.
You saw Monday and Tuesday. It was before the cameras nonstop.
Yeah, and look, what he can do is put people in camouflage, in uniforms, with guns, in streets, get the images of pulling guys out of cars, looking tough, controlling monuments. All that stuff gives him the ability to have that pulpit and talk about crime on his terms. It's actually not going to solve the long-term issues, which would take community policing, resources, and a partnership.
I'm actually so glad that Dan brought this up, because we've been talking about the kind of the camaraderie and all of the tension that the National Guard and the tanks, and you saw them at like all of the, in front of the Smithsonian's, in front of all of the museums, and thinking, like, is that even worth it? And I went back to kind of a military doctrine, which is that you reveal to deter. right? You reveal what it is that you're trying to do to deter more crime, and then you conceal to actually use the force. So in the parts of the city, I learned this last week, where the most intense work against the homicides, the carjackings, everything that the mayor just espoused, all of those people are in undercover, they're in plain clothes, and they're going street by street. It's the deterrent that we're seeing to deter the force and to deter future crimes is what you see of the tanks in front of the Smithsonian.
Niall, let me leave you with this, because our Joe Khalil asked Mayor Bowser today, would you recommend that other cities accept the Guard or federal resources as has happened here? And she said, let me just say this, we're unique. I'm the mayor of Washington. My comments relate to Washington, D.C., and so on. She could have said, no, don't, to other Democratic mayors, but she didn't, and I thought that was kind of notable.
Well, she's, though, in a vulnerable position in a broader sense because of the control and influence that the federal government has over the District of Columbia. She's in a different position to someone like Brandon Johnson in Chicago, Eric Adams, a whole different ballgame in New York, but two other big city mayors.
All right. Thank you all. Story that continues to unfold. Interesting comments from the mayor today. Appreciate it. Still to come. Other side.